Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin. Actually, it's Good Friday, to be chronological about it. Uh, pretty heavy, pretty heavy day. Just watched a movie last night about the Last Supper. Uh, um, so anyway, this is quite an interview that we've set up with Dr. Julie Siemers. Uh, um, um, uh, it is critically important. That's a medical term because this is a medical. It is critically important for you all out there to get to know Dr. Julie Siemers and the work she's done over 4 decades, working as a nurse and most importantly, patient safety and how, as an educator, as a practitioner, as a teacher, as a dean, the founder of Lifebeat Solutions, the author of Surviving Your Hospital Stay. So we just talked for an hour, literally. We just talked for an hour on Julie's background. I give a little of my background, how I'm so uh, innervated by the work that she's doing because I've lived through some of this stuff and I understand firsthand what she's trying to get across. So this is as in the title, The Nurse Who's Saving a Million Lives, One Policy at a Time. Uh, uh, this is so critical for everybody out there to listen and to learn and to be aware and to learn more about Julie. So thank you for your precious time and spending time here and doing this. We have a lot to cover. It is so fascinating. And actually everything changes, literally changes by the day. This whole world of ours is changing by the day, and especially in how a patient can protect themselves. And
Yes.
so I'm done. There are no jokes. This is, I always call this my Johnny Carson monologue. Most of the people I interview have no clue who Johnny Carson was. So you do, and so my monologue is over. How about if you just do some background, and then we're going to jump in to talk about the nurse who's saving a million lives.
Sure. Thank you for having me as a guest. And hopefully, this will be not just entertaining, but educating to your audience. So, I've been a nurse since right out of high school. I worked for 30 years in different parts of the hospital, the trauma center, the ER, the ICU. I spent 10 years as a flight nurse on the helicopter in Las Vegas, which was fascinating. And then decided I wanted to educate nurses to really spread everything that I'd learned in my experience so far to really enhance their experience. So when I entered nursing education, I only had my bachelor's degree. So I worked concurrently on my master's, and then my doctoral project was based on what I found to be teaching in the curriculum about patient safety. And what I uncovered was shocking to me in that even as a nurse for 30 years, I did not know that patient harm was the third leading cause of death.
Wow.
And I was perplexed that we don't talk about it. We talk about, medication errors or how we can prevent healthcare acquired infections, but that became my mission to educate about how we can prevent patient harm. And that kind of led one thing to the other in the last 15 years.
Wow. Wow. What you just said, it's like I have tinnitus from what you just said. Uh, uh, Patient harm, third leading cause of death.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's plunge into so you spent 45 years in nursing. What moment solidified your and this is kind of interesting. What moment solidified your mission to focus on patient safety?
Well, in that research, for my doctoral degree, and finding so many stories of patient harm. And, I was raised by a very compassionate mother who lived a life of service to others. And that just, role modeled for me. And then nursing is a compassionate profession. And so when I would hear and read these stories of patient harm, it was like I could feel them. I'm an empath and I could feel, oh my goodness. So the story I opened my book with, and as well in my TEDx talk that was released in January, I talk about the story of Lewis Blackman as well as others. But that story was so personal because I'm a mother of seven and I can't imagine losing a child, especially to preventable medical harm. And so that began my journey of how can I help patients and their families be informed and educated how to use their voice, how to speak up, what to watch for, especially in today's day and age where, a nurse runs in your room, does what she or he needs to do, you see the doctor for a few minutes, and we really need to create a bridge of patients and their families being a part of the healthcare team, not just a victim of the healthcare team, so to speak, right?
Okay. Um, and again, I've been in hospitals and I've been on that side as an educated patient. Um, I like to think I was an educated patient. So, what are some of the hidden dangers in hospitals that most patients and even staff don't necessarily see?
Healthcare acquired infections are a big problem. They kill a lot of patients, but they harm a lot of patients too. And an easy fix for that is making sure that any healthcare provider walking into your room, if you're a patient or your family's room, is washing their hands 100%. That is the easiest and simplest way to eradicate spreading germs between objects or other patients. So that's a big one. And I know it probably takes a lot of courage to speak up and say, can you please wash your hands before you touch my wife or you touch my son? But you have to think about what the potential consequences are if you remain silent. And I think patients and families really need to change the culture of expectations and not just accept whatever happens to you, but really become an empowered advocate for yourself and your family. And that just means, again, becoming informed and educated. So that's a big one.
Big one, big one. Uh, no names and stuff, but I was in a hospital once, and they had the Purell dispenser thing there, which was empty, and it took them a day. I made 3 phone calls, hospital. It took them a day for housekeeping to fill that up. I was not happy about that. Um,
Yeah. That means they didn't wash their hands, right?
correct, correct. Uh, just beyond, these are simple little housekeeping things.
Right.
Which ties into what you just said about infections. So, Julie, you aim to save 1 million lives. How do you even begin tackling a mission that huge?
Well, I think what I'm trying to teach will spread. Um, it is been how do I say this? In 2024, the top patient safety concern by an organization that reports on this every year was that healthcare practitioners are not ready for practice. So they come out of school, not just nurses,
Mm.
physicians, pharmacists, anybody. They come out of school not prepared, and there's a gap. And I know there's literature out there that supports the nurses in particular that are not safe, competent, or practice ready. So there was a big research article in 2006 that took over 5,000 nursing graduates that had obtained their license over 26 different states and 141 different schools. And they did a 5-hour exam. Part of it was written, part of it was application of knowledge at a simulation of a patient at the bedside, and found that only 35% were safe and competent. 10 years later, they repeated the same similar, N, and found that it had dropped to only 23% were safe and practice ready. But because of the pandemic and because of remote education and lack of clinical experience and lack of hands-on experiences, they repeated that same study in 2021 and it had fallen to 9%. So 1 out of 10 nurses getting out of school and entering practice are actually safe, competent, and practice ready. So that's just affirming that as patients and family members, we have to become our own advocates and not just assume that any healthcare provider taking care of you has got all the information or all the knowledge to keep you safe and return you to health.
So I'm listening to you and I'm digesting it. So in 2021, 1 out of 10 nurses were competent,
Correct?
were competent. Does the media get a hold of this and throw this into the public's, or is it politics and this stuff does not get in front of it? In other words, it doesn't make the 5 o'clock news.
No, and neither does patient harm events. If we compare the aviation industry that had in the commercial aviation industry in the last 2 decades, over 20 years, had 249 people that ended up dead or killed on an aircraft, an accident. One of those was here in my backyard in January when they had the midair collision with the medical or the military helicopter and the
Helicopter, right?
yeah, and the American Airlines. That was 67 people. But when we look at the patient harm events, the estimates are 250,000 patients a year. And it's been going on for decades. And if you do the math, that's about 684 patients every single day. But because it happens one by one across hospitals, across states, cities, people don't really understand the gravity of that number.
And it's just chalked up to statistics and
Yeah.
and it's all preventable, every one of them.
Yep. So
Right.
my mission is to find a way to solutions that we can fix this. And one of those ways is nursing education to replace the gaps or what they forgot or what they never learned that will help keep patients safe. And that is actually what I developed with Lifebeat Solutions, the courses for nurses in the hospitals that have already finished school.
Which we can talk about right now. I'm
Sure.
looking uh, at your website, which we'll tell people about. You have Lifebeat Solutions where you offer courses, um, uh, eliminating failure to rescue and reducing patient mortality, critical pillars of prevention, improving nursing practice, preventing errors and optimizing outcomes, etc. So tell me about the etiology, medical term, the etiology of how Lifebeat Solutions came to be a place where you can get a course and help you.
Yeah. Failure to rescue is a specific niche in patient safety. And essentially, we put the onus on the shoulders of the nurse because they spend the most time with the patient in the hospital. But in essence, it's recognizing, well, it's failing to recognize signs of deterioration, and they're all physiological. So, neurological changes, vital signs changes, fluid volume or urine output changes, et cetera. All of that can be observed. And the literature for the last 2 decades has told us that those signs of deterioration occur 6 to 24 hours prior to an unplanned cardiac arrest.
Wow.
So, my mission is to make sure that those nurses understand you don't just take vital signs to write it down in the chart, they mean something. If a patient has a neurological change for over 10 minutes that they're different than they were, that needs to be investigated. What do we find out? Are they low on oxygen? Is their blood sugar low? There's always a reason. And so, when the nurses are so busy, that's where families can come in and help and say, my mom isn't right. Something is wrong with her. I know her, Or like you said earlier when we were talking, I know my own body. My heart isn't beating normally. Something is wrong. And the healthcare team needs to listen. And that's really the theme of my TEDx talk that I gave. How not to die in the hospital is building that bridge of communication and respect for each other and working together as a team.
Another off-topic question. How receptive is the established community
Yeah.
of hospitals and administrators? How receptive are they to your message?
It's an uphill climb. It truly is. Um, we need doctors, we need nurses. And so a lot of times the hospital administrators will kind of tiptoe around really critical events. But I think we need to bring the heart back into healthcare, the compassion, because the way I look at a patient is they're somebody's family member, somebody's mother, father, brother, sister. And I think sometimes when those decisions are made or not made to facilitate patient safety, like with staffing cuts because budget's tight or whatever, that the consequences impact somebody, a patient that really matters to somebody else. And it's going to be us someday in that bed or beside the bed. And so we really got to look at it as it's not the guy in 304B, it is the man who has a daughter who he wants to live, see, to have a wedding.
Wow. Um, what's the biggest mistake um, hospitals are making today that leads to preventable patient harm? Is there one single thing that universally they're not doing?
I would, I guess, go back if there's one thing is to partnering with patients and families because things like medication errors, if the family or the patient says, what's that pill for? I don't take that pill, or that's not my normal, and we don't have those conversations, the nurse can then go, oh, okay, well, let me check on that. And that could prevent a medication error. Or I know one example that happened in California probably about a year ago. A patient was double dosed with a blood thinner, which you're familiar with, because the nurse didn't chart it. Pardon me. The nurse on the next shift saw that it wasn't charted, assumed it wasn't given,
Mm,
and the patient did die of a bleed, a cerebral bleed,
mm,
because they were overdosed. And so if the family member can say, wait a minute, if that's the blood thinner, the nurse already gave it to her 6 hours ago. The nurse then could say, oh, well, let me double check. And it really is working together to prevent all of the different ways, diagnostic errors, laboratory results that don't get passed on, medication errors, communication problems, washing your hands. I mean, all of those things, I think if we could build that culture of reciprocity and we're in this together to make sure the patient goes home.
okay. Yeah, it's funny. I was a pharmacist, so highly sensitized, to pills and medications and stuff, and the few amount of times I've been hospitalized, I try to fight with them. I want to bring my own medicine. They don't let me do that, but I want to bring my own medicine, and I certainly know what everything looks like. And by the way, I have a great piece of advice for you to share. When I'm in the hospital and they're giving me the meds to take in a little cup, each one that comes out, every one of those has and I'm looking, and I bring this with me. Now watch
That's
where I go with this, Julie. So I bring this with me, and they're giving me, a lot of stuff I take is generic, and 16 different generic forms of, Cardival, whatever, and I hold that pill up and I look at it, and then I go to Google and I type pill number 67A. What is it? Because it's right on the pill. And in 3 seconds, Google spits out 67A, Cardival, 3.125 milligrams. Boom. So I think a magnifying glass with every patient going in, and they have the right to look, and all you sit there, with your iPad and you plug it in, and I do that. I did it just as a matter of safety. Takes a couple extra seconds before I put anything in my mouth.
That's a great tip.
By
I
the way,
love it.
it's a wonderful tip. It's a wonderful tip, and it's every pill that you got. You're in trouble if you got a syrup or a liquid.
Right.
That's trouble. But generally speaking, everything is a pill form, and every pill and every capsule has a number on it. And there you go. Tells you everything you need in 3 seconds. Anyway, so I'm taking a deep breath here. I think we need to go off topic for a second. So here goes. I forewarned you, or this was going to happen. And I like to ask this question because I borrowed it from Barbara. So here we go. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Princess Diana.
That's great.
She, to me, is the epitome of compassion and empathy. And I just always respected how real she was and how she connected with every single person. I think she probably modeled that after Mother Teresa, but it speaks to me.
Mm, great answer. Great answer. I have these vivid images of her uh, uh, in Africa and with the kids, with the kids
Yeah.
and enduring images. And I still remember that. So as soon as you said it. Okay, back to work. In your consulting and education work, what's one particular transformation story that like stands out?
When I was teaching the nurses, and it seems so basic because it's vital signs, and we call them vital for a reason. But when I was teaching the concept that the respiratory rate is the most sensitive and earliest indicator of patient deterioration,
Wow.
and yet 80% of nurses don't count it. They kind of just make up a number. Oh, it's probably 16 or 18 or 20. That looks normal. But it's, again, the earliest indicator. And so it's really important
Wow.
to understand that. So I had a nurse reach back out to me a couple months later and said, I was applauded by the doctor today that I actually saved this patient's life because I called her, the doctor, and said, I'm concerned about this patient. Their respiratory rate is 26 to 28. And a couple of hours ago, it was only 20. And the doctor said, okay, well, let's get a chest x-ray and a blood gas and let's see what's going on. And they transferred him to ICU. It was early pneumonia, and they weren't saturating very well. And we caught it early. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Huge.
yeah.
Huge. By the way, I never knew that. I'm on top of things. I never knew respiratory rate is such a key. Um, 'Cause that's not the thing they put on your finger, is it? No.
That's the oxygen
Oh,
saturation.
and is
Mhm.
that part of that whole picture?
Here's the thing with oxygen saturation. It's a laggard measure because during my career, one of the fun jobs I had for about a year and a half was selling medical devices, and it was pulse oximetry and capnography, which is measuring oxygen and then carbon dioxide. And so I had this little device and I would put it on and demonstrate. You could see the numerical number and the waveform, so you could see if it was accurately picking up. And I would hold my breath with this little nasal cannula scoop on, and I would show the machine, and it would show my oxygen staying 97, 98, 97, 98. But you could see my end tidal CO2 or carbon dioxide 36, 37, 38, 40. And so that indicates effective ventilation. And when we're not measuring that and we're relying on only oxygen saturation and not counting respiratory rate, which really regulates the CO2, the carbon dioxide, right? That's where patient harm can occur. One of the stories in my book is about a man who had shoulder surgery, had no comorbidities except sleep apnea, which is a big one when we consider combining that with opioid therapy, because opioids can cause respiratory depression and sleep apnea. You're already not breathing effectively, right? And they only checked on his oxygen, saw it was 97, 98, didn't count his respirations. He wasn't on an end tidal CO2 monitor. And a couple hours later, when they found him, he was dead. So I think the training is so important.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm saying wow because I've been down that road. Um, what role do nurses play in leading change? And this is important. What role do nurses play in leading change within the system? Um,
I've been in lots of leadership positions as well as the worker bee, so to speak. And as a leader, I've always believed that you can't affect change or improve without having boots on the ground. So the nurses are the frontline workers and do the work every single day. And I think we need to empower them. We also need leaders to meet them and come together and really find solutions that are effective.
really working with them. I mean, it's all a team. Bottom
Yeah,
line, it's just all one big team.
it
Uh,
is.
it is, and you got to be respectful of every member of that team. Um, even house.
They're all integral, to each piece of the process. The laboratory technicians, the even housekeeping are
Just said
really,
that. I just
yeah.
I said housekeeping.
Oh,
No, you didn't hear me. I whispered at housekeeping. That too, huge. As
it
I
is.
as I've experienced myself, huge. And they should also be and they should also be lauded and praised because they're part of that team, a real part of that team. Um, so I'm listening to you and you're talking about transparency and empowerment. So how do you teach hospitals to embrace both transparency and empowerment?
I think understanding that most patients and their family, when they speak up, even if there's emotion, that they're really just trying to help and they're worried and they're concerned. So understanding that, again, that team. But one thing I teach patients and their families, I'll give you two pretty good tips. The one is the three P's. So for family, and be present, be polite, and be persistent. So what I mean by persistent is if you're uncomfortable with something that's going on with the patient or even yourself, I don't feel right, something's wrong. If they blow you off or minimize your concerns, you need to escalate that. So we have the nurse, the charge nurse, the house supervisor, the chief of medical staff, and an administrator on call. That's a chain of command at the hospital that you, as a concerned family member, can escalate. And then the other piece is the cuss words. And this is what I talk about in the TEDx talk too, is why those words are so essential to get the attention of the healthcare team. So the C, I'm concerned. U, uncomfortable. S, I'm scared. And S, there's a safety issue here. So, for example, you could say, I'm really concerned. My father's not acting like himself. Something's wrong. Or I'm really uncomfortable with the amount of pain my mother is in. This is not like her. Something needs to be done. Or I'm scared. This situation we're in right now is beyond our comprehension, and I'm not feeling really good about it, and I need it explained a little further. Or it's a safety situation. My son's cast on his leg is too tight because his toes are blue or they're cold. This is really a safety problem because I know there's no circulation if they're cold and blue, right? So using those key words can really alert and flag the healthcare team that they need to investigate.
Okay. Interesting. Again, I'm taking notes. I'm probably the only interviewer around that actually, while I'm interviewing, I'm still taking notes, uh, which is testament to you and the gravity of what we're talking about. Um, so, uh, what is your, and this is important too. What is your long-term vision for your work? Uh, and how can listeners support that mission? Um,
My mission, like you said in the beginning, is to save 1 million lives. And that's just, a number that I definitely think is attainable, but not by myself. And so, you as a family member speaking up and preventing a medication error or preventing a healthcare acquired infection or, a missing lab result. Hey, where's the results of my dad's brain biopsy? Or, is really going to facilitate that communication that can prevent errors. And I think that's how it's going to happen is just the ripple out of people becoming informed and educated and knowing that you have those rights as a patient and family members, you have rights to have medical information that you can understand, the right to fair treatment, these things that as a human race that we deserve to stay healthy or return to health from the healthcare team.
I look at myself in my world. It's a wonderful world. I interact with every practitioner that I have, and I even know lots of the nursing staff, and once you flip that calendar, it's almost a comedic. It's almost, I can almost send this into to Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. It's almost a comedy routine. You flip that calendar, you're in your 60s and happy-go-lucky, You flip the calendar, you're now 70. The day after you blow out the 70 candles, boom. It is so comedic. Everything under the sun. It's like you're like we're a car. I mean, everything under the hood. It's just you just we take it for granted, but when you turn 70, I mean, and so I've developed great rapport with every one of my practitioners, the nurse practitioners I mean, it's been for me a wonderful experience, and I guess it's because I am proactive and I am hugely respectful of them, in their knowledge, and we work together as a team, as you suggested.
Yeah.
And I get great, wonderful care from, and I mean, I don't think the only practitioner I haven't seen is a psychiatrist. I
Well, you're keeping that brain healthy, right?
Yep. So I'm cool there. Never did, never will. But everything else, as a 70-year-old, soon to be 80, I mean, every conceivable practice, I've been there, done it. There was only three. People, my kids, my son and daughter-in-law, how many doctors this week? Oh, three, five, six, four, two, but it's great. And I do have it, actually, in my novel, I hold this up. I hold this up. In the novel I wrote, I fictionalized. There's a cardiologist in here, who's modeled after my cardiologist, and who's just unbelievable, amazing, hands-on, on top of everything, and I can't say enough wonderful things about the cardiologist. And then there's a orthopedist, sports medicine orthopedist, who's kept me literally put together for 25 years. Even in my youth when I was playing tons of tennis. So the utmost, total, amazing respect and love. There's a love there, and I'm sure these practitioners can feel the love I have for them and their caring. So I guess I'm in a skewed world, and it's a wonderful world. So we talked briefly about Lifebeat Solutions. Can lay people take these courses?
I don't know that they would understand them
Okay,
that
okay,
well,
okay.
but I have ebooks on my website,
Fine.
and yeah, as well as, my book that really is to inform.
Okay.
But I think there's so many resources out there too now. It's just directing, what you're curious about. But I think the resources I have at least are a starting point of getting some basic understanding and information. For example, if you're in the hospital and you see, your wife's on a monitor, she just had surgery and you're watching her heart rate, and now you're seeing, oh, an hour later it's higher. And then you keep watching it because, you're vigilant in her health, right? And that's a time where you can say, what does an elevated heart rate mean? Because normal to 100, normal for an adult is 60 to 100. It's quite a big range. But if she's beaten at 110 beats a minute and now it's 115 or now it's up to 120, there's several things. Again, we go back to physiology that could be going on. She's got a fever, she's in pain, she's dehydrated, and we really need to figure out what's going on because those vital signs tell us. And so I think starting with the basics like that, we talked about respiratory rate, blood pressure is another indicator of how well the pump is functioning, as you know, with your atrial fibrillation. But, figured out the basics. I think it's exciting. I guess I'm a nerd, but I think finding out about the human body and how things impact one body system to another, is really fascinating.
By the way, it really is, and a real quick anecdote. I've had one hell of a journey on AFib. I've read just about every article, every study imaginable. I mean, all these new all this stuff. But when I did everything I did in November, December, January, I had consultations with both my amazing, wonderful cardiologists. And the result was, my body just wants to be in AFib. And as long as I'm relatively asymptomatic, just have a good time. Don't drink a lot of alcohol, blah 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 blah. But anyway, I did my own concoctions. I did some more weight loss. I did some more weight loss in January. I do intermittent fasting anyway. Weight loss, no, cut down sugar, tons of fiber. I'm, I mean, I put fiber into my air filter. So I'm breathing. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. I fiber all day long. So I put all these things together, and one morning, in early February, I woke up and, I showed you my little EKG machine, and I was in normal rhythm. And you know what? I've been in normal rhythm now for over 2 months. Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I'll know, well, I'm going to see one of my cardiologists Tuesday to discuss it. Well, I've done something right, obviously.
Yep.
And I'm in normal rhythm, AFib is progressive, but I'm so proud of myself, and it's a gift. I'm grateful every day. I'm in normal rhythm. And listen, tons of millions of people live with AFib, and I was living with it, and I was doing everything. But anyway, um, another burning question to ask you, two burning questions as we wrap this up. Do you have any favorite movies? Just changing the subject.
Uh, Shawshank Redemption always ranks right up there. I mean, I think probably with everyone.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't remember the name of the film. It was a French film, and we remade it into the American style, but I loved the French film better. But it was based on a true story of a man who was paralyzed from paragliding and his caretaker. He went through so many caretakers, but just the life-changing relationship that they both had. I think Kevin Hart actually played in the American movie.
Okay.
Can't remember what it was called, but I just love heartwarming, relational,
Yeah.
like how can we be a better people together? And I love the inspiration that I get from watching those kinds of
Yeah.
movies.
Well, I agree with Shawshank. I watch that all the time. And actually, I've been in Zihuatanejo. That's a real place. Um, they have a Club
Wow.
Med there, and my son and wife and me, we went to Zihuatanejo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but that was the end of the movie. When
Wow.
Red all right, the last question, and it could be a short answer. We discussed this before we went on air. The evolution of AI and how that ultimately is going to make the world a better place and provide better treatment. Uh,
Yes, absolutely. I was at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement Patient Safety Summit a couple months ago. And there was a speaker he is involved in 7 different research studies out of UCSD. I think it was UCSD, UC Irvine, no, UCSD. And amazing how AI is complementing, not taking the place, but augmenting, the physician's work and supporting it. I mean, that's one example, but the other, I think it's just intelligence in one place that scrapes it together from evidence-based research, from peer-reviewed journals that, I have to say this, being a nurse for 30 years and not doing any research or reading articles much. I mean, I would listen to, when we had workshops or whatever and improving some things. But practitioners, doctors and nurses really don't have the time or take the time in their normal life unless they're pursuing some passion like I am, I guess. But it really shortcuts the path to deeper understanding without having to read. It can do a synopsis for you and gather all that data, and you can read it in 5 minutes that would have taken you hours, and to synthesize it too, where it's understandable and digestible, I think is phenomenal. I feel blessed we live
yeah,
in this day, really.
correct. And it's funny, I say that all the time. I was not put on this earth to live in a cabin by a little brook and growing my own fruits and vegetables and not having a light. And so I'm always grateful living when we're living. It's
Yeah.
gratitude. Although
And
I did a thing with a clairvoyant, and she told me I'm 1,200 years old. So I've found
lots of wisdom there.
a lot of wisdom there. It was an amazing experience. But anyway, gosh, we're done for this segment. I am officially inviting you back.
I would love to.
Yeah, we'll put some things together and chat, and we'll discuss that ongoing. But this has been completely illuminating for me because a lot of stuff you talk about I had no clue, and
And you're well read.
I'm pretty well read and I stay on top of things, and but I just had no clue.
Well, thank you. It was an honor.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to stop recording. Uh, and we'll do a 2-minute wrap. But thank you so much for taking the time out, Julie. Really,
Thank you.
thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, so do I.